Oh boy.
Yeah. Yo, what up, everybody? Welcome to the Cars and Kicks podcast. I am Jacques Slade. Today we have a very, very special episode for you. The guest that we have today, I've known him for years. I think he still likes me. I think we're still friends. He probably doesn't approve of some of the things that I say online. I post videos on social media, and I just wait for a comment from him to be like, "That's not true," or "That's not how that works." Like, have I not taught you anything? Is really what I feel like the comment is going to come from him. But we'll get into all of that later. Sorry, as we always do here at the show, we need a proper intro, and I didn't think of anything this week, so this one is going to be totally off the head here. So give me a second to gather myself.
Should we have waited to hit record just a few more minutes?
Maybe we should have waited to hit record. But you know what? We're just going to go with it. We're going to keep it. We're going to keep the energy going, and we're going to find it. We're going to find our spot. All right, ready? All right, here we go. Yeah. Come get your card. Come get your kicks. Cars, and kicks. There we go. That's all I got for you guys this week. I'm sorry. I wasn't prepared. I was so excited about Brett that I didn't get prepared. But you know what? That was fire.
I think Brett just signed off. I think he's gone. I think he's done. He's gone.
I think you should be pretty proud of it. That's like, it's up there with like grind and clips level beats. Like you.
Yes. Come on. Anyway. Sorry. Anyway. All right. Anyway, I was going up the west side when it was supposed to be this.
My daughter just mastered how to do it. She took me to see the Pharrell movie, and now she's always doing it. So
man, I love it. I took my son to see that movie a few weeks ago, the Lego one. It blew his mind. He loves music. He loves Legos. He's like, "Dad, that was amazing." So. Yeah,
that's awesome. You love to hear that. That. Anyway, to kind of continue with the intro, I'm Jacques Slade, a.k.a. Cousteau. You can find me all over the internet. But really, I am the least important part of this show here. This show would not be what it was if I didn't have my two co-hosts, which is Nick and Erik. They are the glue. I guess that makes me like the oil because I'm always trying to break things apart. But either way, we're let them introduce themselves. Go ahead, Nick.
My name is Nick Engvall. I've been working in the footwear industry for 18 plus years now and obsessed with cars for at least double that. So I'm actually really excited to talk to today's guest, too, because we've known each other a long time. And you've probably heard me talk to him on other podcasts that I won't shout out right now, just not to get too shameless. And I'm going to toss it to Erik to introduce himself.
Man, you can plug your other podcast. We don't care over here. But no, my name is Erik Valdez. I'm the third wheel today here. I'm the car guy though. So we'll today's journey. I like the other two do not know Brett. So we just met a few minutes ago online, and I am super stoked to have him here today. I hear lots of great things, some murmurings about C8 Corvettes, a whole bunch of sneakers in the background. So I'm excited about it, man. I can't wait to dip into this.
Okay, and with that being said, I guess it's time to do an actual intro for Brett. No, I'm kidding. I won't embarrass you like that, Brett. So I've known Brett, I would imagine at least a decade now, and he is just one of those incredibly talented human beings that you very rarely come upon. He's been in the sneaker world. He's been in the car world. He's back in the sneaker world again. And his insight and the way that he interprets the world when it comes to design, the way that he looks at a sneaker that all of us look at and finds little details and finds messages and storylines that I feel like it's a hidden talent that he has. He's also just a really good guy. But unfortunately, he lives in Detroit. But we won't talk about that part right there. Anyway, outside of that, Outside of that, he's
Wow.
a great guy.
That is an amazing city, man. Shots fired at Detroit.
Yeah. Shout out Detroit. I'm a Laker fan. I hate everybody. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Brett Golliff. Put your hands together for the man. He's a legend.
Man, I don't think I've ever had an intro. This is incredible. You guys are so kind. Thank you. And Jacques, yeah, it's been wonderful. You remember the first time we met? Do you remember it?
I don't remember exactly where it was.
Air Jordan 2012 launch in New York at the, technically Hoboken, New Jersey.
New Jersey.
Oh, yeah.
New York adjacent is like I call it. But yeah, and I'll never forget it. I didn't feel like I should have been at that event or I was supposed to be there, and you took me under the wing, man. So I appreciate it. So
I was a big fan already. You had written a couple of things, probably a lot of things online already for what was that? What was the website back then?
Called Concept Kicks. Yeah.
Concept Kicks.
Yeah.
In particular, I remember a story you wrote about the Air Jordan 11, and I was just like, this guy, he's so far more advanced in this space than I am, and he understands this so much more than I understand. So it was like when I was kind of fanboying a little bit when I met you. So I'm glad I hit it. You know, my ego was probably bigger than it should have been back then. Anyway, with that being said, let's just hop into it. Brett, talk to us about your story. How did you get here? Where did the love of sneakers start? Where did the love of cars start? I don't want to dominate this interview because I can sit here and talk to you all day. So Erik and Nick, feel free to be like, Jacques.
Oh, trust me, I'm going to have some questions. I know it.
Let us hop in. But let's start with the early stories, Brett. How did you get into sneakers? How did you get into cars? How did that all happen?
One of them sitting right over there, my original issue of Kicks that came out in 1998. That I've always been big in reading and media in general. I'm obsessed with reading just all the time and taking everything in. And Slam was really important to me. I actually got a subscription to Slam on issue 1 with Larry Johnson when it came out, and then that led me 1994, my guys. And that I was in 4th grade. My mom, I'm from a small town in Indiana, so nobody knew what the hell that was, but the photography of that thing was so just different, and the layout and the rawness of it. And I have a sister that's 8 years older than me, so I was already listening to the music that they were talking about. I was like, this is Brett, like in a nutshell right here. So that led to Kicks, but then at the same time, this is probably the only advantage to like my parents being divorced and then going to multiple grandparents' houses. Car magazines, in particular Motor Trend, Car and Driver, and Automobile, you could sign up for 4 free issues.
Yep.
And what I would do is sign up for 4 free issues and put it at every different address. So when 4 ran out, I rotated it to the next address and then to the next and the next. And so I was deep into cars. And I'll be honest, I think there's a natural thing, especially of all of our ages and generation, that cars led to this to some extent. But there was another part that went back to shoes, was also Jordan 14 being Ferrari 550 Maranello driven and other pieces like that. That led me to kind of start tying the obsessions together, because about 7th grade, I started drawing my own shoes. And I was like, well, clearly I need a Dodge Viper shoe. I need an M3 shoe. I need to go down all these paths, and just started taking all that on. And, I still just did a ton of sketches around that idea and kept going down that path. So those two kind of came together basically about the same age, around 12 or so.
Wow. That's this kind of reminds me a bit of my childhood. I'm a little bit older than you, but in terms of how I've always admired design of both things. Initially, it was cars for me. And then when we kind of told this story a bit before, but I got my first pair of Jordans when I was in 5th grade. And it was the Jordan 4s, the military blues. And I loved the angles and the webbing and the little details in that just kind of parts of it reminded me of automotive design. The mesh on the side looked a bit like a old school grill from, certain cars and stuff. And the angle of the strap on the side to me looked a bit like a roll hoop from a Jeep, like a CJ5, CJ7, kind of that triangulated shape and everything. And so, I used to sit there and draw all day long. For me, it was cars, not so much sneakers. But part of the reasons I'm passionate about both things kind of all centers around the design. And then, eventually it led to self-expression and all that other stuff. But that's awesome, man. Super cool. Like beginnings of your story there.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, no, it's
so talk to us.
Go ahead. You go ahead.
I was gonna say, talk to us a little bit about what you're doing now. Where is Brett now?
Well, I spent you touched on that Concept Kicks thing. Concept Kicks somehow led me to getting a job at General Motors. I had an offer from Nike and Audi at the same time, and then a former director of innovation at Nike was at GM, and he was reading the blog, and he connected me. So I spent 11 and a half years at GM that spanned, which I'm sure we'll get into. But at that same time, I had the consultancy going, and I worked with almost everyone. And then in particular, I found a niche with startups because the everyones of the world, the big brands and stuff would have me doing Blue Sky, which was fun and it was great. I kind of give them stuff and they would take it in line and go and do things with it. But what I found was there was far little of me in the independent world, or far little of people like me in the independent world. I can help guide these startups much further. And I found a niche in that around 15, and it started becoming repeat. So then basically around 21, I would say realistically the conversation started around 19 with my wife and I, but definitely around 21, it was if not now, then when? When am I just going to go in and go down this path? And I had a couple of brands that were just more than extraordinary and started creative directing all those, Snims being one of them, Ethics being another one. Then that comes into Equalize, and then a couple other brands that are yet to come out but are deep into the process phases right now. And I've just been all in on that for the past almost 2.5 years now, and kind of building a bit of a partnership with Aaron Cooper as well, and how we design and create and other pieces like that. So it's been a pretty extraordinary adventure, to be honest.
Yeah, I think the cool thing about just being adjacent to your career too is you've balanced both of these worlds in some way that I think a lot of people really wish to. I've been on the sneaker side as far as career, I've been on the sneaker side all the way through. And, I can't remember exactly when we first connected, but probably around that same time, right? We were doing complex stuff. We were doing finish line stuff. I mean, it's crazy to think that was 12, 14 years ago,
Yeah.
for us. So, Brett's a little modest, and that's one of the things that makes him great. And I love the way that, to Jacques' point, the way that you look at the world is so fascinating to me. I remember when you kind of shifted away from doing the blog thing, and it was people would look at, your social following at that time and think, oh, well, Brett might not have the millions of YouTube, subscribers that Jacques has. But I feel like the sneaker world had a collective just sigh of disappointment when you put that out there, because we had all seen you do so much, not even just your insight on the design stuff, but even just your fun little sketches that we did at Finish Line a few times, where it's cool, let's do some things that now are kind of have turned into a commercialized, we just put colors on everything. But we had so much fun with those stories and being well, what if LeBron went to Miami first, or what if Jordan, didn't go to the Bulls? All these different things that kind of almost set the foundation for colorways and stories now in a lot of ways, which is really kind of interesting. And to me, I was always fascinated that we crossed paths so many times in our work stuff, but even when I was in Detroit, we never saw each other when I was in Detroit for that couple of years. And then we would run into each other I forget what it was, SneakerCon in LA one time. Yeah, you were out there for a Corvette thing, and and really, it's your career is kind of the perfect analogy of why this podcast will work and why people are enjoying it so much, because your worlds that you work and play in intersect so frequently that it's I wish I could just have the wall, this is Brett's life drawn on the wall and be able to see that, because it would really justify all of what we talk about every episode on this show. So I know that's a little long-winded. I'm just saying, thanks for coming on. I definitely appreciate you doing that for us, because you were at the top of the list when we started the show, and it was a list of 10 to 15 people. It was okay, well, Brett's obviously got to come on here because one, you're also removed from GM, so we could talk a little bit more about that than we could get into the last time you and I talked about. but two, like what one thing that I think you kind of alluded to, but Jacques brought up on the previous episode is like the sneaker world is like kind of an open, run right now. Everybody's looking to get into it. Nobody's really dominant especially on the basketball court the way it once was. And wonder if you could talk about how you think about that, being that you've gotten to work with some of these startups along the way.
Yeah, I think, well, arrogantly, I won't be modest in this one. The moment I saw the first clip of this podcast, I think I hit both of you. I was like, why am I not on it? But it was the most personal I've taken something in a while. But anyway, as far as like the way footwear is going right now, it's a weird spot because like, all right, let's go during that run of us riding and working together. Let's be real. Like, and it's still kind of this way, but it's not the same. But it was like for every 20 posts, like 18 were Nike. And
yeah,
there was such a dominance, but it was also so built around innovation. And I think what's fascinating is like with SNIDS, we specialize around chefs. Like I'm working with Nancy Silverton and some really high-end, like Michelin star level chefs, essentially the Michael Jordans and the Penny Hardaways and the Scottie Pippens of that world. But it still has a Nike influence in it. Not how we create, but like that world still has that influence. Obviously, sports, athletics, basketball still has that world in it. Startups, everybody points to them. Everybody's read Shoe Dog, so clearly they want to start a shoe company. But like, it's this weird time where people have more access to anything. And I think I actually spend more time going down the path of why. Because there's this other side of it of nobody needs another product. Nobody does. So you better have a good reason as to why you're going to do it for multiple reasons. One, the state of the world and, consumering and how it's just destroying the environment and other parts. But the other part is that everybody's kind of doing what you're doing. So if you don't know how to brand it, if you don't know how to market it, if you don't know how to sell it, and you don't have the capital, you're not going to survive. And I think the other part that, like, as I've gone down this journey is getting people to understand that it will not be an overnight success. And if you have that overnight success, it probably means that you bought your way into purchases via some sort of e-com hack or something like that. And those return purchases aren't going to come back. So it's understanding that you have to build something, and probably year 3, if you do it properly, is where it's really going to come together. And so watching those journeys and being a part of it, I think it's the most healthy side because you also don't have to be an Audi, a Nike, a Puma, or any of that in the sense of volume. I mean, realistically, if you can put together, I kind of call it like the perfect like farm to table restaurant where it's like you kind of take everything in and your customer base and you have this return and you keep it coming and you build it that way. You have a healthy network and community, for lack of a better term, that you can rely on that lifts you up and you lift them up. This idea of selling billions of shoes is not needed. You can sustain and be more than healthy by going down this path of building the right process and building in those ways. I think in the past few years, I've turned design into a business in the sense of understanding that side of it and bringing all aspects to it. So I can basically do everything but ship a pair of shoes out at this point. So yeah.
It's really interesting because you posted this whole conversation, this bit of it, you kind of ties into something you posted recently on social media, which is maybe don't just do it. And the whole idea of, that slogan, obviously just do it, Nike's catchphrase that everybody knows and has known for a long time, makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways. But this different take and everything you're talking about here is, to me, kind of refreshing, especially when you talk about the idea of keeping it small, so to speak, like supporting your community and having that reciprocation versus trying to grow something into this conglomerate that eventually gets sold to somebody else and you retire a billionaire. That mentality is cool to a certain extent, but what are you doing for the people that are supporting you on the way up? And so I loved that little take when I saw it on your social media. Now hearing more about your approach to this, it's really refreshing, man. I like that.
Thank you.
I did want to fill in a little bit of gap for myself and those listening that maybe aren't familiar with you on Nick's wall of Brett's life, so to speak. You mentioned drawing the cars and drawing the sneakers and, up in like 7th grade and everything. And then the next jump was, getting offers from Audi and Nike and this and that. Where did that drawing in your classroom? How did you end up getting to where you are today? Did you go to art school? What was your path kind of to get to where you are?
Yeah, I actually have. It's fascinating. Now being like a parent, my daughter not to sell her out too much, but I think she's a bit of a protege in art, like just absolutely extraordinary.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's really great, and I'm proud of her very much. But like, I'm beginning to be able to see myself through her eyes, and we were essentially the same. I don't know why, but when I was about 3 years old, my mom put me in private art lessons, and that's not something that's common in my community. I'm from a town of at that time, 5,800 people. I mean, it's a small town, and by the time I was 8 or 9, I was oil painting and getting into sculpting and doing all this stuff. So I had this real deep background in the fine arts. And I got into high school, and the way Midwest high school was set up at that point was you had to do this core 40 to go into college. And I knew I was going into footwear, and at basically freshman, and I would argue with every guidance counselor. I would use slam as basically my proof that this is a real thing. And luckily I had a teacher who was one of those private art teachers and his lifelong friend, almost a second mom, Jeanette Meridew. Her husband had a car designer that worked for him at his company. He was a wheel company. So you being the car guy, C5, Z06, that was a magnesium wheel. It was one of the first magnesium wheels that were done on it. He worked for that company. He was the VP of that company, and he had a design staff. And he's like, "Oh, would you be willing to talk to Brett?" And so I started talking with him. At the same time, I was emailing, and Nike Talk had happened. I was emailing with Jason Petrie, who was Alpha Project on there at that point. Jason had just went into Fila. And I was like, "Hey man, I got to go to design school. Where should I go?" These are the 3 places I'm looking at. It was Pasadena Art Center.
Yep.
It was College for Creative Studies, Detroit, and then it was Savannah College of Art and Design. And he's like, "Honestly, you can't go wrong with any of them." And I was like, "All right, well, geographically, this one's 2.5 hours away." And luckily, at the same time, my high school art teacher just went ahead and applied for me. So it really all just kind of worked out. And I went to CCS from 03 to 07, and then went to New Balance for 5 years. And, that slightly catches you up. But at CCS, I mean, there's 100 kids that would enter into design school, and literally, it was 110 actually on my first day. I can remember it. 109 of them raised their hand to get into automotive design. They accept 20 spots at the end of your freshman year. It's as simple as that. So those other, those roughly other 90 people have to figure out what they're doing with their life. I was the only one that raised their hand to be a shoe designer, which was really uncommon then. Jason Maiden had just graduated. He is a mentor and great lifelong friend since then. And I went down this journey of I would take the automotive design class, and then I would talk to the teacher. I'd be like, "Hey, let me do shoes. I've done 4 weeks of your shit. Just let me do fucking shoes and critique it this way." I'm sorry for the language, but I was like, "Hey,
it's passion, man. Roll with it."
Yep.
Yeah, I was like, "Just let me do this." And it would be one of them was Mike Pevavar, who's a GM design god to some extent, and his renderings, his designs were just incredible. He's like, "Yeah, that sounds great. It'd be amazing," because he wasn't used to it, and he would, let me come in and do it. So I would convert all these car things into shoe things, and it just helped build the portfolio and lead the way. Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. By the way, side note, my father-in-law has a C5 Z06, so I'm very familiar with the car, and it's one of the coolest. Yeah, it's great, and it's one of the coolest OEM wheel designs. Not just from an aesthetic standpoint, but the fact that they were magnesium and they were staggered in not just width, but size, diameter. It was a cool, again, I'll go down a car geek rabbit hole right now if you let me. But yeah, that's super cool. So what a great little way into all of this, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's ironic because for me, this is actually my first time tracing it back to that. But then, I've become lead designer of one faction of Corvette. And it's when I came in, we were wrapping up C6. So the 60th anniversary C6. And that's probably the biggest one that came out. And the 100th edition, I kind of finished that one up. But the GM 100-year celebration one. And then it was finishing C7 at the same time, where that was out of getting Stingray coming out. And then that led into that Z06 and that ZR1, and the Grand Sport in particular is probably my favorite of that. And then ultimately just being a part of the C8 from the infancy, literally the infancy. Well, it depends how you see infancy. You can go back to 1950, but true infancy was 2012. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
go ahead. I'm going to let you, because I'll go down
Well, I
a
was
car
going to say
geek thing
that
here.
that's an interesting a rabbit hole we should go a little bit further down, because for people that are listening to us, they probably don't understand. You're talking about the C8 really starting in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And like, when did that car come out? 2018,
We unveiled it
19?
in turn in 2019, like July 14th-ish, 2019.
So that process takes significantly longer than what like the sneakerheads that are listening to this know and understand is like kind of that 18-month window or whatever. Talk a little bit about that, because I think that's a fascinating aspect of this world, because I also kind of came into Corvette fandom not knowing you at the time, but the C5Rs that raced in American Le Mans were like,
Yep.
I mean, I hated them because I was a Porsche Flying Lizard fan, but I love them so much because they've like brought competition to that series. You know, you had like Ferraris, Porsches, Corvettes, and eventually the Cadillacs out there, where it's like, okay, now you're actually getting to see cars that are, you know, tangible cars on the street in racing form. But that's another rabbit hole we should avoid probably, because I could go long on that too.
Yeah, I mean, so the question being like timing, it goes into, you know, I think like I joked about it at the beginning of the show, but to be fair, Eric, it is technically a quote that I keep for myself. It's actually the start of my portfolio. I do believe I've always been somewhere trapped between two modes of transportation in some way, shape, or form, because they both are. One just moves a hell of a lot faster. And, you know, as I looked at it, I think that like a lot of people ask, well, how do you do shoes and cars? I mean, I don't think I'm being naive when I say this. The creative process is the creative process. They're not that different. You ask questions, you solve for it. Good design solves for something. It has to have a reason for existence. And I can point holes through. This is usually what you're talking about, Jacques, like when I comment on your stuff. I can point holes through anything that is just some glorious product line manager that's like, yeah, we just need another colorway, put it out there, you know? And it's like, and then you can't figure out why you have 18 colorways for a shoe and only 2 of them are selling. But that's another conversation. But anyway, the automotive world really is like the main scale of difference between the two is cost. It's as simple as that. Like trying, I don't know, Aaron would dispute me heavily with what I'm going to say here, but which is totally fine. But I would say, like, you know, you would have to really try hard to get like a shoe that's going to be mold cost and everything like $750,000. Maybe some original foam posits. Maybe if anybody ever does foam posit again, you could get it up there and be crazy and do something like that. There's probably some way of doing some crazy injection molded croc or soccer type thing that would get it up there. But by and large, that's a very expensive process. That C8 Corvette, like the business plan, and we had to go back to the board twice to get more money, started out at $1.2 billion. So that is the scale of difference that comes into these things. So you have to have a business plan, because $1.2 billion, even for a major corporation, will bankrupt them if it doesn't go properly. So the scale of decision making is the real difference between a lot of this type of stuff. So it starts out essentially getting the business plan, but usually we've been working on stuff on the side. You know, it's funny. I can't remember. I was chatting with somebody this morning from the Netherlands, something like that over there. But anyway, and we were talking about just technology and like footwear takes a really long time. Like footwear, you're seeing a lot of the VR headset drawings and other things like that. But like, and GM was like one of the first VR studios, like dating back to like the 90s, because you're trying to validate these things without spending millions upon millions to make it happen.
Yeah.
So we spend a lot of time in the wind tunnel, and we spend a lot of time getting what would be considered engineering criteria and like the basis of what has to be there. Then it's kind of like laying out the path of profitability. Like how many, you know, you get 4 wheels that are tied to the main program plus like 7 that are accessories. Bring in paint colors, bring in seat designs, bring in other stuff. Tie in the fact that we were doing a mid-engine, which automatically puts you on a level of like scrutiny in a different way. You're automatically either pick the child. They're either going to compare it to a Lamborghini or a Ferrari. It's one or the other. So you're put in this world, and then how do you do what you just said? Still make it attainable to the people that have always bought it. And then how do you walk it up in price? And then how do you do performance? And how do you do this? And how do you do this? And how do you do this? The reality of all of it is we planned for the end first and then did the beginning, because you're able to trickle down scale at that point, which the end just came out, which is the ZR1. It's not the end. Yeah, it's not the end, but that was one of the ends at the time. And that was like, because that package is the biggest in size, right? So you have to then work backwards from that. And then you also have to, like, Porsche is the most beautiful example of all this stuff. Like, those are guys that are phenomenal at knowing who their consumer is, but also taking and being able to enable a walk-up that feels original for every one of them. Like a GT3 compared to a turbo, compared to the Carrera, compared to the GTS, compared to all the, like, they just do a good job of making each one be substantial. Mm-hmm. American cars historically haven't always been great at that. I think personally, I'm a little biased, but I think we've done a good job on this Corvette of getting it that way, where each one has significance.
Sure.
But it could be better, but yeah.
Let me ask you this. When you talk about, this obviously years long process from inception to actual debut of a vehicle and everything that you just mentioned that's involved, how do you're obviously on the design side of things primarily, but you kind of like in the sneaker world, although different levels, you've got engineers, you've got other people involved in these conversations, because, a shoe can look pretty, but if it doesn't perform, no athlete's going to want to wear it. A car can look great, but if it doesn't do anything, especially something that carries the namesake such as Corvette, if it doesn't perform, nobody's going to buy it. You're going to alienate, the audience that has been buying it forever, especially because now it's becoming mid-engine and all these other things. How do those conversations work? Because to me, it's a lot like, architects and builders, right? Like an architect will dream up and draw all of this great, amazing thing. And then you go to an engineer or, someone on the other side and be like, okay, that looks great. Now, I don't know how the hell I'm going to make that work. So how does that dynamic work internally to come to a final product?
I think everything is a blend of art and science. I think, so I teach at CCS as well, and I usually just do independent studies. But this semester I'm teaching a full on class. So I have 9 students, and what I try to describe it as, and this is leading to the full answer of your question. There's a difference between drawing and there's a difference in sketching. And I think that this might answer part of it. Drawing is recreating something that exists. Most of the time when somebody's drawing, they're putting an object in front of them and they're drawing literally and trying to replicate what that is.
Sure.
Sketching is taking something that because of what you've seen can become what can exist. It's like having 75% of the knowledge to take it to the future and the forward of it, because you're figuring it out. That process isn't that different. So as you mentioned, the give and take of engineering and designing, criteria is the most important piece of all this. It has to perform. So if you decide, and if I don't have tattoos, I probably won't get tattoos. But if I get a tattoo, it's going to be millimeters matter, which comes from Aaron Cooper and what he's drilled into me. And it didn't make sense to me until we were actually doing this shoe, which is the Equalized 360. But and that's not meant to be a plug, but I'm using it as a statement where I was like, no, Aaron, I want this EVA to come out here. And he's like, why? And I was like, well, because I like the way it looks. He's like, cool, you just added an ounce. Did you gain anything by adding that ounce? Because you took away from that player. So let's translate that to Corvette. One of my favorite things at the time when we were doing it was I wanted to do a fabric seat. I wanted to do a Cordura nylon seat. And the reason I wanted to do a Cordura nylon seat is we knew we had this hybrid version that was coming and weight mattered, but you weren't going to be able to take out certain pieces. So Ferrari, if you go down their independent spec and you go down their path of making stuff, they have a completely Cordura nylon that you can go and touch. And guess what it does? It takes nearly 45 pounds out of that car, because you're getting rid of all that dead leather weight and you get rid of some of the seams and you get rid of some of the foam. So that was one of the biggest pieces that I was trying to do for our competition seat. Made it through, and it took our weight out of that thing by nearly 9%, which is a big deal in a car. That's
huge.
Seconds off a lap time, right? So the point of the matter is millimeters matter. Have your justification for what it is. find for most engineers, you're asking them to rethink everything that's put in front of them and their parameters. And they're not wrong with their parameters, but you've got to point at other things. Here's examples. I'm not saying do that directly, but we can use that as a way to reverse engineer to find out our better way of doing it. So learn from others. Steal like an artist is a famous statement, and then millimeters matter. And you just push down that path because there's a give and a take to everything. If you're solely doing it for aesthetics, you're not going to meet those performance values.
Man, I see a lot of this is I'm really latching on to this conversation for a variety of reasons, because again, being the car geek and everything, I love the engineering and the design element of it, but it all oddly relates to what I ended up doing for a living, which is being an actor. And like when we collaborate with writers and producers and directors, like every single choice you make as an actor, you've got not only your own personal input, but you've got everybody else's input riding on that, because everybody sees us as the final product, right? We are the car, we are the sneaker that got made that, hundreds of people had their input on. And so if you just phone it in, or you don't ask the whys or the hows or the whats, none of it matters. You're just playing pretend. So, and I think a lot of people don't realize, not to toot our own horns, but as actors, like the best actors, and I'm not going to necessarily put myself in that category even, but the best actors, I think, are really good at asking questions and figuring out problems and solutions before anything comes out of their mouth. And so I think all of this I'm kind of going through this kind of, I don't know, enlightenment process right now as you're saying all this stuff, because it's connecting all the dots for me as to the why did I gravitate towards this? Why did I, what is so interesting about that? And how do these worlds mesh so much in my head all the time? And it's starting to make a lot of sense based on what you're saying here. So this is a therapy session for me.
I was going to say,
go.
Yeah, I was going to say, no, as a creator, it's like tapping into like that every frame matters mentality of when you're editing down a video of, one frame longer can change the entire tone or the entire emotion or the entire feel of a video. Just because you stayed on one frame or you cut one frame too short, it can make a difference in how the audience interprets what's going on. So hearing you say like millimeters matter, it makes me think of like how when I'm editing something, how it's a bit of a saying. I don't know if it's in the car world, but they say it a lot in the creative, like editing video space, is to kill your darlings. Is just like, if you have that beautiful shot, if that beautiful shot doesn't add to the story, it's got to go. Like it looks great. It was beautifully shot. Like the sun is sparkling and everything looks absolutely amazing. But if it doesn't keep the story moving along or add to the context of what's happening, you got to cut it. And like hearing that millimeters matter thing, that's the first thing that triggered into my mind, like how much frames matters. Because there's time I'll be editing here, something as simple as for social media, and I'll cut one frame or add one more frame just to either get a breath or to take away a breath. And it's really interesting to hear you say it from that perspective as well. I
will tell you that, like, whether it's verbally or through art, I think the most important thing to my career is ultimately communication. I strive, like, knowing that, like for instance, all of this somehow, whether it's automotive or footwear, is going to end up in some sort of tech pack, and that thing has to live past you. That has to communicate so much. And I go out of my way to like almost build the mold patterns for some of these people and like lay it out, because, and then it's like, as you mentioned about the script side of things or the breadth side of things, then it's also knowing that just because you created this, it doesn't end there. It's having the conversations, it's building the relationships, it's getting people to feel welcome and open to collaborate. The one thing that like C8, like, to tie a lot of this together, I am kind of relaunching my approach to social media and bringing more of the sketches and other things into it and bringing all that back. And you actually brought it up naturally, Erik. That was the first one. But like the point to it is that communication ultimately is going to bring this stuff together. But when you start to see this, like one of the main things that I talk about, and that is the name of my design firm, is Good People, Good Design. And I learned that on C8, even being a part of a massive corporation that's like 250,000 people that work there. It was a group of like 15 of us that really ultimately drove the direction of that vehicle. And the reason that it came out the way is the same thing that all of you guys are saying. It's that passion. It's that pride. It's that healthy, like contention and arguing that has to happen. But you all come back to the same goal that you're trying to achieve. And ultimately, it's a blend of art and science and all of this. You're conveying an emotion that captivates and pulls somebody in. And it's the most important thing. I literally work on products for the most part that nobody needs. Nobody needs it, but you give them the reason to want it and desire it. Nobody needs that Corvette. Like, not a single person needed it. Man, do they want to take part in it? They want to feel it. They want to hear it. They want to see it. They want to touch it. Like, you have to hit all of those emotions and bring it together. It's funny because like now, like with Snibs, I've been so deep in the food world and getting to know like chefs and other things. Their creative process is the same. And what I've started to take of being involved in all these different worlds is that I actually believe that people are successful are the ones that are doing the things that we just laid out, asking the why and being willing to challenge. But then when you get the information, it's doing something with the information. And I think that that's a really important and powerful thing. I think like right now, I really hope it comes full circle. My kids are both 7 and 10. Man, I ask them why a lot. And I could feel it with my son. He's like, no, but God, I hope it works. Like, I really am hoping. I'm like, hey, just get healthy at asking this. Challenge your parameters. Tell me why. Why do you want it? Yep. Gavin, why did you pick that apple? Why didn't you take the banana? Like, you know, like give me your reason. Have some vindication for what you're doing, you know?
My son is 6, and I do the same thing. It's reciprocal. Like he's the kid that asks why over and over again, which was me as a kid. And you mentioned at the top of it that your daughter is like a mini you, and I have that with my son. And on the flip side, I'm constantly questioning him too, because I feel that healthy questioning back and forth is what builds character. And it also, you find solutions. If I do things for him without giving him an example of why or the reason behind it, he might figure out how to do what I did for him, but he's not going to really understand the whole process behind it. And vice versa. If he's asking questions and I don't explain it to him, I just give him a quick answer. Sure, he might get the answer. He might end up being a quote unquote good test taker of life, but is he going to understand the concept behind everything and the why behind it? So, man, parenthood is, that's a whole other topic, but it's so self-reflective and challenging and beautiful. And it's amazing, man.
So I want to add a little bit of context real quick. 2 things. One, if you're hearing the millimeters matter thing and you want a perfect example, go back and listen to an episode from a couple episodes back with RJ DeVera. He talks about the Fast and the Furious. I won't get into it, but just go listen to that episode and you'll hear exactly why the millimeters matter on the film side. Secondly, I want to also say, like, for those that are new to this whole world, Aaron Cooper, maybe Jacques or Brett, you could give a little bit of context. I've already told Aaron he needs to come on the show as well, but yes. Obviously he's had a huge impact on the 3 of us and probably even on Erik without Erik's knowledge.
Yeah, go ahead, Brett. I'll let you dig into
Aaron,
it.
for me, it was Slam issue 138, where like it's him like leaning on his desk like this. It's got like, I think he's got the Zoom 95 illustration on it. He's got the Pippin 2 and everything. And like that was like, I was like, yo, this is it. This is the one that I would bring in. Like, it was easy to do Tinker, but he was more relatable. And much like what we talked about, a lot of my writings led to him and I coming together circa 2012, 13, 14. But Aaron is, Aaron's a special person in my life. I talk to him almost daily now. Have been talking to him at least weekly for the past decade of my life. And there is something very special about Aaron that connects people, connects passion, but also drives like results and pulls the best out of you. Like, you know, you guys have been very kind with your words about me, and like I don't necessarily feel like I have that career that I'm always proud of. I think that's just people sometimes in general, but like I think the past 2 years I've gotten my doctorate in design because of him. Like he has revitalized like how I think and look at stuff and just changed my whole world. And I think the point to it is like, I'm not paying him to be a mentor. I'm not doing any of that. He's doing it out of the kindness of his heart because he sees not just the opportunity, but he believes in the person and he believes in it. And he does that for so many people. And he did that for an entire industry. And like, I think both of you know him from for multiple reasons, but you've also been involved in the shoe school weekend or whatever you went at Coop Camp and like go and do that. And like, he's a genuine human being who's probably one of the most special parts of the footwear world ever. And I think that the other part, tinkers like this as well, but they don't realize who they are to some of us. And I think that that's, there's a beauty and a gift in that. I could go on for hours just telling you why Aaron's an important human being. But
wow.
Yeah. It's really just I mean, the design stuff is great. And like, not to take away from any of the design stuff that he does, but just a really genuine, nice, caring, thoughtful human being more than anything else. But, his design resume is, as long as anybody else in the industries. But he's just a really, really great guy. I was literally doing, before we started, I'm doing a video about this new generation. And so this version of it, I guess, was by Nick DePaula. He's doing it for Slam. They're doing a special 30th anniversary for Aaron. And one of the things for LeBron, I shouldn't say for Aaron, for Slam and for LeBron. But one of the things that, just thinking about earlier parts of our conversation, is that when Aaron originally drew this, he put the Nike swoosh up here instead of the Nike swoosh being down here. But when the shoe released, the Nike swoosh was down here. And so the question, I guess, and the reason for showing this, Brett, is how do you, for people that are coming up in this space, how do you deal with, like, they're messing up my design from the corporate side when you don't have that control?
I think to some extent I've learned to be a better voice of it from him. But I think the Corvette side plus like other shoes, I mean, the reality of it, everything's kind of a give and a take, right? There has to be some things that fall on the sword because you're sacrificing what the importance of that product is. Those importances can change, right? Like, as I pointed out on the 360, adding more volume just takes away from somewhere else, right? So that wasn't a good choice. But like, I'm in the midst of doing the final like colorways of a few of these. And like, you can see it's coming up like purple on there. And it's like, I got to like fight for the advocacy of like, yo, this is the wrong thread color. You didn't execute it that way. You're not capturing the vision. We're going to push back on it. Aaron's situation with that swoosh is probably a much bigger deal because of the size of the corporation, but you have to find your inner voice. But ultimately what I think I really learned is that like, you could be the argumentative artist that everybody doesn't relate to and doesn't understand. But if you can find your way to meet them at a level and communicate with them and point them out and bring them along for the journey, is the better success you're going to have. I found that like a lot of times, and I think it's stereotypical, right? That like artists get caught up in their vision. Visions are great. Like, I love having visions. Leave that in my sketchbook. If I'm working for something that's ultimately going to be a commodity of profitability, you have to sacrifice because that's the end result and that's the end goal. If you don't want to be a part of that, that's fine and that's healthy. Go find your way of making that on your own. But if you're working with others, you got to work with others. Simple as that.
This is like a little therapy session for people that are watching. Is that like an ego thing though? Like, is that like swallowing your ego, even in your pride? Okay.
Yeah. It was fascinating. There was like one dude that I worked with at New Balance. He eventually went to Nike and he's no longer there now. And he was somebody that was years older than me. And I really admired his like sketch style and I admired like his like just vision work. And I was like, man, this is incredible. And that guy could not get a design through the system. And it was predominantly because of the way he approached the people. It was, it just wasn't inclusive. I think if there's something that I tend to have is I do have an ability to read a room, even if that room is a text message or if that room is an email, if that room is a call like this or anything. You can read people's feelings and, you either need to decide, are you going to double down and go against it? Or are you going to try and bring that person along? Or are you going to back down? And I also think that like this, the sketch that I put up of like, maybe don't just do it. Well, that's also like, don't just do it to do it. Like, think about what you're doing. Think about what you're trying to achieve and make sure that like you're all on it. Because again, I'll go back to like another big project of mine when I wrapped up and left GM was the Hummer EV. And we did that in like a year. We did that like a year and a half, which has never been done in the automotive world. It was exhausting. And like you throw COVID into that as well. Part of it's remote, all these other pieces. One of my favorite things is I got put on the emergency vehicle person because I got to go into factories. So like I'd be driving down Detroit highways with nobody on it because I was considered like a necessary person because I had to review this product. But anyway, it was just like you ultimately come back to the people that are going to make this product, and the humanization of it and the human qualities of it have to come through, and you have to work with others. So
yeah, this process again sounds super familiar to being on set and, you know, working with directors and writers. And I've had, for the most part, I've had really good experiences throughout my career. But, you know, most recently, the show that's running right now, Superman and Lois, was the best group of non-ego having collaborators I've ever worked with, because inevitably you get a script and, you know, you play a character for 4 years, like I got to do. You get to know the character from within. Well, your writers have been writing to this character for 4 years, and sometimes your interpretation of a certain scene and the way it's going to go isn't going to match up. And then you add the element of the director and then the producers, and then back, not even on set, but, you know, the studio heads, and everybody has their input here. But to be able to have those healthy conversations and be able to back up why, either say, hey, look, I'm really standing firm in my choice to play it this way, and here's why. And people saying, I get it now, let's roll with it. Or vice versa, being like, I understand why you wrote it that way. It makes sense. I'm not going to die on this sword right here of, no, I'm going to do it my way or I'm not going to do it type of thing. And so it really, I think at the end of the day, like you said, communication is key, and being able to collaborate with people and have these healthy conversations when you don't agree with something to ultimately keep the greater good of a great end product that an audience or a consumer is going to enjoy at the forefront of the conversation. That's why people succeed to the level they succeed. Is early on, if you have too healthy of an ego, regardless of how creative or talented you are, somebody's not really going to want to work with you at the end of the day. And so it's fascinating, man, how much of this relates to all my world. So this is one of my favorite conversations we've ever had on this show.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's fun. Yeah, no, I look, man, passion is the thing that's driven me, but it's also like your constant enemy at some point too. It's like knowing when to, I guess the way I look at it is like passion has to have parameters. Otherwise it could just like really drive you crazy. And it does. I mean, frankly, not even joking, I had my therapist session before this. So it was like, it's one of those things where it's like, it pushes you to like this edge, and you got to know how to balance it. You got to know how to do it. But I think it's understanding like, so much of what we do, especially everybody on this call, is intangible. Like you can't put metrics to it, right? And like you can say there's views, you can say there's people that bought it, you can say these other pieces, but ultimately it's a feeling, and the feeling comes from how developed you've put yourself into the research and into what goes into it and how much you've brought it along and understanding what it is. And that's what gives you the, like, you got to trust what I'm doing here. Like you got, like, this is what it is. I know it is. Go along for it. Because everybody else that doesn't think this way is usually the people that are in charge of the financials for whatever great reason. And you got to get them to understand that, like, this is just an intangible feeling, and just believe in my conviction for it, like believe in that piece that I'm going to go forward with. And you got to bring them along. And usually it's through collaboration, because they just need to be heard. That's usually what the case is. So. This whole conversation now, it reminds me of another kind of question, so to speak, is what do you enjoy, or what have you enjoyed more? Like the process of coming up to where you are, or now being a parent and being a teacher? Do you enjoy sharing this knowledge and stuff that you've learned throughout these years as a process more? I think, I still think I'm in the come up. So like, I really enjoy that. I think because I'm lucky that I've kind of like rebooted multiple times, but I don't always consider it rebooting because they all like start at like a different level. But like, I have this, I've talked about SNIBs a couple times, but I have this like thing about SNIBs where like we don't have a product line, we have an infinite loop that like even by the time you get to the most expensive product in that industry, that means you're probably opening your own restaurant. So you're starting back over and you're at the bottom and you come back up. I kind of feel like that's where I'm at. I gain knowledge and I regrow and kind of re-loop. But to directly answer your question, I think that the reason I'm a good teacher, and I hope the reason that I'm a decent, acceptable dad is that I keep learning. Like the main reason I wanted to teach that class down there is that like I graduated in 2007, so nearly 20 years, and I wanted to see how they learn. I want to see what they draw. I want to see what their interpretation is as to how they create. And at a minimum to see it, at a minimum to grow and make me think. But like just the other part is like, what's been fascinating, and I thought this, like I even thought this when I was at the GM side of things, when we would review like portfolios every year as new people that were coming in. I'm like, man, why am I seeing the same projects that we drew like in 2007? It might be rendered differently or executed in a different way, but it's like the same thesis and same process. And I think there is something to the learning curve, whether it's because you're blanketed in 4 years of what experience is. But I'm like, man, you guys are still solving the same stuff we're solving for. But I threw that syllabus out the window that they gave me. And like, I gave the CCS like a fake syllabus. I went back and created my own, and like, it's going really well. So like people have been accepted of it, but it was just like, I'm not going to sit here and follow this. Like they need to be making, like I have them, I printed off, I 3D printed a bunch of last. Last is what a shoe's made on. Gave that to them day one. I didn't allow them to draw for like 3 weeks. I made them research a shoe and tell me exactly why it is what it is. There's like 2 kids in there that are really sneakerhead kids, and like I knew it. And they're the ones that are like, yeah, like I'm going to be the best in this class. And it's cool. Like I respect it. Brings in like a whole thing on the Jordan 3. And like his focal point of the Jordan 3 really frustrated me. But like it was it's set up perfectly for collaborations. And he pointed out like the fragment, and he pointed out like, all the various pieces. And I was like, no, here's what it's actually set up for. Michael Jordan averaged 37.3 points per game and scored 3,700 points in this season. He was Defensive Player of the Year. He was All-Star Game MVP. He was League MVP, and like led the entire world. That's what it was created for, to enable him to be able to do it. It just so happens that it looks really cool as well. So it's like getting people to understand that everything has this reason. And it's not to say that their excitement about the product isn't there, but it's to get them to understand that like you want something that's iconic like that and you want longevity. Think of it as to what it needs to be. Because if you're only thinking about it the way it looks, I say this to my son a lot. He's in AAU basketball. I'm like, look, man, that quarter, you were focused on looking like a basketball player. I need you to be a basketball player.
Wow.
Like, go be a basketball player. Don't just worry about the way your layup comes up. Like, put it in, And I think that that's a lot of what I'm trying to get that class to think. That's what I'm trying to get my kids to think. It's what I'm trying to get myself to think sometimes too. Yeah.
So that remind just like spot on with the conversations I've been having with my nephew playing baseball. Like just got into baseball within the last year or so, and is absolutely more concerned with looking like a baseball player than being a baseball player. And I wonder, like, we're all of a certain age, right? Where we probably look at that and can look at it, the generations coming up and say it's a generational thing. Do you think between the 4 of us, do you think that we had that same, mentality at a certain age? Because I think that's one thing that like it's hard to look at it to your point, Brett. If I think of 1988, I'm thinking like we didn't have the money to get Jordans, but I did get an armband. That was as close as I could get because Jordan wore his. But like that era for us was so poignant and powerful about the athleticism that we saw. And it's almost like we've moved, and maybe this is just like a whole therapy session for me to go have. But like, it's almost like the collaborative, like the aesthetic aspect of everything that we took from sport is now, like the sport doesn't matter to a lot of people in the same way. And I'm wondering how we kind of combat that as a collective, right? Because I also think that like, thinking about the stuff that, we've talked about on this show, people are driving cars less. People are customizing cars less. People are obviously not as concerned with sneakers as, 10, 15 years ago, or us as kids. So what are the things that we can all do, and the people that are listening can do, to actually support that next generation and their curiosities towards these things that we are so passionate about?
I'll use one this weekend. So one of the students I have in my class is like massively into cars, but like most of the kids that like get into cars at like CCS, they want to go do the next Ferrari F80, which is horrible. I was hoping we would talk about that at some point. But anyway,
we totally can.
But he is more into like very obscure kit cars and building his own. I don't know how he did it. I don't know how much it cost, but he just convinced his parents to get him this amazing 3D printer, and he's in the midst of like making his own kit for his Mustang that he's doing, and like is printing it, and then he's going to fiberglass over it. Absolutely incredible. The culture's still there. It's just very niche, and there's other parts. But so he has to design a shoe in my class, and his goal, a big part of his day to day is actually going to junkyards and finding pieces for his cars, and he wants to essentially create a shoe for that. He's designing his shoe vary in parts. Like what makes a great shoe, in my opinion, I'm not going to use one of my own, so I'll use my near and dear Aaron one, is like forward movement and continuity of parts. It all comes together and has flow. Everything has a reason, but it looks like it comes together. However, his design is like toe cap, midsole, midfoot, pieces. It's just pieces everywhere. And like he has this beautiful flow to it. And I'm trying to get him to relate. I talk shoes. I don't talk cars at like his level. So he like sends me this email. He's like, hey, I need you to like explain to me better. And I was like, I just wrote back. I was like, what's your favorite car, man? And like he wrote back, I could pull it up, but he wrote back some obscure Ford Focus. I think it was like a 1995 Ford Focus. I am going to look. If I look
Cosworth RS or a Focus, you said?
An Escort RS Cosworth.
Escort, yeah, that's what I was assuming, yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, all right, dude, so this car is kind of you, and it is kind of your shoe. Like, it has a bunch of bolt-on parts to the standard RS to take it above. It's got the motor side of it and all that piece, but ultimately they had a body, and then they kitted it out past that. But look at the kit. It still flows from front to back, and it's integrated. It looks like it's meant to be. Take your design, keep all the function that you're doing, but bring it together like into one visual and one flow and look. And I think the point that I'm trying to get at, I don't know how we're going to get your nephew to love baseball, but I can tell you that you have to find the way to relate to them and bring it all together. Because as I look at like what Gav's going through, like he's now, he's starting to get into like puberty and get older, and like looks matter to him, like all these other parts. Like I get really annoyed. Like last night was practice. He comes home from school. I'm like, hey, need you to go upstairs and get dressed for practice. Also need you to remember, it's not a fashion show. So he has he's grown into like some of my sizes. So he's like putting on like an old Supreme shirt that I don't wear anymore. I'm like, this isn't what we're doing here, man. Like this isn't what we're doing. And like, it's just such a different generation in that sense, because it's around them and it consumes it. And I think it is, for me, it's definitely starting younger. Like, and there's much more influence in that,
I'm going to step in here as the Gavin advocate. Let him cook.
I was thinking look good, play good, right, Dad?
I was going to say, as the Gavin advocate, maybe there's something there that we're just not seeing yet, of where his interests lie. That mix of sport and fashion that we haven't found what that is yet. So that's my Gavin advocacy moment here for the show. Thank you guys. Thank you guys for coming.
I'll share that when this comes out. I'll be like, hey, Jacques is for the kids. Yeah, no, I got you. But it's more of a, I don't have a problem with it. I don't like it when it comes to football. Like he's been wearing the 360 and the 247 for a while. So he's got that going. It's more of like, we shouldn't be spending more time doing this. Let's spend more time outside, like making a jump shot before we go. It is fascinating though. Yeah.
We could go off with this forever and continue this conversation forever. So I'm just going to hit you with just a couple of quick fire questions before we get out of here. Right. First car you ever owned?
Chevrolet Ultima. It was Illumina. A Chevy Illumina. Yeah, and it was basically falling apart.
First car you wanted.
I had a feeling that like this question was going to come up. There's so many layers to this. I mean, if price wasn't, it's like a Ferrari 250 GTO. But realistically, yeah, E46 M3 would be my real answer because I felt it was attainable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got you. Okay. First sneaker you saw that you like, I wish I designed that.
M3. Oh, that I designed? Oh my God, that still happens every day. If we're talking modern times, it's the Zavachka above me, just because like it's just high level mastery, and then the Flightposite 1. Yeah,
Flightposite 1. Okay. Shoe you wear the most right now?
Three things. I'm going to show three of them. So Snips Clog, wear that around the house all day long. I really do a good job of advocating for Brett anymore. I don't really wear. If I'm wearing something other than this is the next ethics shoe. So I've been wear testing this for a while. And then
Sweet.
The 360 I've been wearing a lot. And if my wife and I get the chance to go to dinner, I usually wear a pair of like Y3s or something like that. But yeah.
Okay, I love that. Kind of car you drive now as a designer, did that change the car that you drive now, or has it influenced the car that you drive now?
Oh, absolutely. I have a station wagon. It is the Porsche Panamera Sport Turismo.
Yes.
Yeah,
I'm a massive thumbs up to any wagon form of any car out there. So kudos to you on that.
Same. Yep. Same.
You know what my favorite like car that I loved with that had like deep internet lore when I was probably like a sophomore was, if I understand it properly, there was a Sultan over in the Middle East that had a Ferrari 456 MGT wagon made, and it was a dark green. Oh, that car was extraordinary. I would still love to get my hands on that. I'll never get my hands on that. I'd just love to see it. But yeah.
Yeah, I think it was the Sultan of Brunei. He's extremely well known for his eclectic collection of uber unobtainium cars.
Unobtainium cars. I love that.
So, Brett, I got one last question for
ahead.
you. Because you've done so much design work on both sides of this, like how much of your, you mentioned it real quickly in passing right there. You're an advocate for Brett more now than you usually are, have in the past, which how much of that impacts the way you think about what you're going to actually wear, where, like in your like just daily flow of things, are you like looking at things you've done, and like, oh, cool, I want to wear that now? Or do you still have that, like, because I have that self-doubt, like I have that, like things I've written in the past where somebody's like, oh, I just read this thing from like 8 years ago. And I'm like, oh my God, please don't read anything I wrote from 8 years ago.
I have that exact feeling for stuff that I've wrote. But I would say that most of the stuff I'm wearing it for a deep reason. Like that one, like I've got ones that I've cut the tongue to a different shape. So it's all of it. And even like this clog, like it's like, how do I improve it? How do I take it forward? The other part though, that like we haven't talked about is I'm getting deep into apparel making, both on the ethics side and the snip side, which are two wildly different things. One is like very Carhartt whip. And then one, I'm basically taking like, I guess the simplest way of saying it is a modern version of like the 1997 like Jordan brand apparel when it launched, very cut and sew, like high end stuff. And I have spent the past like year and a half kind of traveling around from New York to Savannah, Georgia, believe it or not, and then LA, like working with these people, and I am learning like apparel deeply. I didn't even think about it until we started this call. I was like, shit, I should have wore some of the apparel that I've been designing. But I've learned so much, like so much. And I'm really enjoying that. Like that's really enjoying that. But yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Man, this, like I said earlier, has been one of my favorite conversations we've had on the show. I wish we could continue for hours on end, and I feel like we'll have to do a part 2 of this at some point. But
for sure,
absolutely.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure meeting you and talking to you, and I really appreciate you coming on and sharing these stories, man.
Oh,
yeah,
Thank
Brett. Before we get out of here,
Yeah.
tell us, give us all of the things. Give us all the things before we get out of here. What are you working on? What are you doing? Where can people find you? Where can people find the stuff that you're doing?
That's a good question. Yeah.
How do we get it? What's our discount code? Like all the things. Just give us all the information.
We'll DM you our addresses after the show.
Addresses and sizes are always helpful. The quickest way to get a hold of me is probably Instagram, which is just at Golliff, Golliff. bgolliff@gmail is the email since like 2006. So send that over. Everything that I'm working on right now, like I have just stuff that I'm really proud of in all levels. I just kicked off a phenomenal innovation project for like Snibs, and I'm expecting all that in. Like I'm hoping it's on my front porch right now. But I'm proud of what we're doing with the ethics side and where we're taking that. I'm extremely proud of, maybe it's better to hold up a different color. I'm extremely proud of this guy and like where it's going to go. This is probably one of the most challenging things I've ever done, most rewarding, working hand in hand with Aaron and guiding. I'm proud of, honestly, I'm proud of having that conversation with him almost every day around this type of stuff and learning more. The Snibs apparel line is going to be amazing. Ethics is dope. There's so much. I guess I should say this releases 11/20. And I think why I'm most proud of this is that like I've made in my own decisions and my own choices. I've turned down Nike 5 times. And
wow.
I never thought, I think when I did that, I always had good reasons, and we could get deeper, but probably shouldn't be public. But I always, and then there was a missed opportunity at Yeezy, predominantly because Yeezy became Yeezy. And I always just had this like self-internal thing of like, fuck, I'm never going to get that level of a product. And, but I think realistically what I always wanted to be at Nike was to work with him and to build a relationship with him. I have the relationship with him, and now I'm working with him every day, and this is a really important thing for me as a human, and I'm just very thankful and grateful for that. So that's probably all of the things of Brett and what's coming out in the world in that sense.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome. And that's EQLZ.com.
Yep, EQLZ.com. And then I'm relaunching my website any day now. We've got a few back-end challenges, but that'll just be brettgolliff.com. And the way I set it up is like, I went and got a photographer. I don't know about you creatives, but I have a real hard time of like relying on my own schedule to get my own thing made out. So I just went and hired a photographer. So everything, luckily the guy is like, his name's Max, and he's from like near where I'm from, but he does beautiful archival photography for the Fort Wayne Art Museum. And so it's going to be an archive. It's just going to be a scroll of like everything. I think like right now I have 158 different shoes already going on there. And I think that was a third of what was like photographed. I still have to put the car stuff, but it's going to be awesome. Really dope thing. So I'm pretty proud of that as well. But yeah, but EQLZ.com and then that 360.
Cool.
So
we'll put links to everything in the description.
The ethics, and then the Snibs.
Yep.
That's what's the website for that?
Snibs.co, which we just did the rebrand actually. Coincidentally, today it went live, and that was that's been a beauty. Like that thing, I'm really proud of too. Like this is a future shoe we have coming called the Pro. And then the Clog has been an extraordinary thing for us. We have a shoe with Headley and Bennett, which is like really big in that era of footwear. Like they make aprons for everyone, but like doing this has been so much fun because I love food. Like food is a deep passion of mine, like learning to cook and everything like that and cook from scratch. And like Chris Bianco and Nancy Silverton, like they're all part of the crew. And like, I don't know, listen to those guys talk is no different than this, like hearing how they creatively approach stuff. So I'm very proud of that side of the world as well. But yeah.
Love that. All right, guys. I am Jacques Slade. You can find me at KUSTOO. Again, the affable idiot here on the show. And it would not be what it is without those two legends that I have there, Nick and Erik. Erik, go ahead and tell them where they can find you.
Yeah, it's just my name at ErikValdez on the socials. And Nick?
Nick Engvall at Nick Engvall on all those socials. Make sure you follow Cars X Kicks Show on Instagram or carsxkicks.com to find links to your favorite podcast app, YouTube, all those other things. Just a huge shout out to Brett for coming on, man. Like it's been, we've only been doing this show for a few months, but I feel like it's been long overdue for many reasons. But thanks again for joining us, man. And we'll put links to everything you've mentioned in the description of this episode. Appreciate everybody. Catch you in the next one.
All right. See y'all.
Peace.